13th of April, welcome to Number of the Day. It is 0.9%, Francis heard, and it doesn't sound like a massive number, but right now, if you are an American, everything your president has done has somewhat backfired.
Yes, this is showing that Americans are feeling the war in their pocket because it is the inflation rate in the United States in March. So it shows the rate at which prices increased between February and March. Okay, so it's not huge, but it is the biggest monthly jump since 2022. And it reinforces all the evidence we now have that Americans are feeling the war. They're feeling things are more expensive. 2/3 of this jump was because of gasoline prices, which they call
is our petrol
fuel, right? Yeah. So gas prices jumped by 21%. They were already going up. Remember, it hit us a bit later. They were already going up, but because they felt it throughout the month. But by the end of the month, 21% jump. By now, we're talking gas prices up 35% in the United States. So we are feeling the same. But these are the people who voted for US President
You took the
Donald
words out of
Trump.
my mouth.
Yeah.
I mean, he's back for a second term, isn't he? And their fuel prices, gas prices, they will also analyze it the way we do. If the gas price goes up, that means food prices go up. It means
Exactly.
And this is where the inflation part comes in. And I need to ask you the Econ 101 question again, because I've seen many people in the comments, Francis, probably me included, inflation, interest rate, just the summary again of inflation and why this is so bad.
So inflation is very simple. It is the rate at which prices are rising. And you usually, let me try and explain it as I understand it. You want a moderate inflation rate because you don't want prices to go down, because then people don't buy things because they're waiting for the prices to go down. So you don't have economic growth. You don't have a lot of shopping. So you want price stability. You want prices to go up very moderately. If they go up too quickly, you're in trouble because your salary doesn't change between February and March.
Yeah.
But suddenly prices change dramatically between February and March, and then you are out of pocket. Your cost of living becomes so much higher. Now, to control those rates, what central banks do is if inflation is getting out of control, if it's going up too quickly, which could get the economy into trouble and people into trouble, they then raise interest rates, which makes it sounds counterintuitive because then you have a double blow because now you've got to pay more on your home, say. Home loans will be the main one, car loans.
Yeah.
But that means because credit becomes more expensive, people basically have less in their pockets to go and spend on goods. And that spending also has an inflationary effect. So it calms everything down. It doesn't indirectly, because it doesn't always target the oil price, right? Which is the problem. And we talk about it. We have imported inflation in the oil price, but then we raise the cost of a home loan and that affects everything else. But it's all the central bank can do usually. So in addition to prices going up quite radically, the US, like us, is now talking about the fact that they won't see interest rates coming down, which was the hope. And we were waiting for interest rate cuts, more interest rate cuts, because that was the trend.
It might be the opposite now.
Yes. And the opposite now, we're even looking at the possibility of interest rate hikes in South Africa later this year, or interest rate hikes in the US and around the world.
So now, obviously, the Americans are feeling this now. It's actually nice to talk about how the Americans are feeling this, because there's the small matter, and I don't want to get too political here because we're talking numbers, but isn't there something known as the midterm elections for Donald Trump? A small matter of the midterm elections coming up. I can't remember the date or when this is.
It's about 6 months away.
It's not far from now.
So it's close. Yeah.
And it's going to affect his numbers, his polls, and the Americans, I can't imagine, are being happy with this, especially considering that there's now a US blockade of the Iran blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. So we're re-blocking the Strait of Hormuz. Is that
Hormuz.
We're blocking the Hormuz again with the US?
In fact, both blockades are kind of unblocks because the Iranians were letting certain ships through now. Now, the US is saying they're going to block any ship that comes from an Iranian port or is going to an Iranian port, but other ships will be allowed through.
Oh, good heavens.
Essentially, this is a fight over who controls this waterway and who decides which ships go through. Returning to the political analysis, a lot of the analysis last week was that Trump wants a deal because of the midterm elections, because US consumers are starting to feel the pain. And remember, the US is a big exporter of fuel. It's now independent in terms of its own shale gas and all those other things that they do to supply the population with fuel. So the idea was that the US would be more insulated than many other countries, like our own, but they are still feeling the pain. So the analysis was that that was hitting home to the president, and he wanted a deal, but of course it wasn't going to be quick and easy like the US delegation thought, and that didn't happen. And oil prices, by the way, have gone up 8% today because of that blockade. And just as our final number before we wrap this up, $100 per barrel seems to me to have become a bit of a war threshold. So whenever investors think, okay, the war is over, it goes below 100. Yeah, as soon as there's concern again, it goes above $100 per barrel. And what we know right now is that the US economy, US consumers are feeling the pain of this war. Like Gareth said, something of a backfiring here because inflation went up almost 1% in March.